I'm selfish. I'm ruthless. I'm power hungry. I am a vampire. Welcome to the Forgotten Realms, home of Baldur's Gate 3. Today we'll be addressing a question from our Discord server. What is Astarion's truest alignment? It is some debate among the fandom because although in the Forgotten Realms IPs, like Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms, Astarion has an official alignment. However, in Baldur's Gate 3, no one technically has an alignment. So in this essay, we're going to dive into what makes someone a neutral evil and what makes someone a chaotic neutral, two classes that people debate over for Astarion. Although we're aware he has an official one in the Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms, this discussion is more on the application of 5e lore rather than simply reading off stats from a sister game. So, trigger warning. If you're someone who can't see the nuance in discussion and lives solely off of stats even when they're not officially in the main game that the character came from, then this one's gonna upset you. But if you're open-minded and you're a person who understands complexities and nuances in Dungeons & Dragons and you love crafting complex characters and situations, then you're gonna love this one, babe. In this essay, we'll be using a variety of sources. These include, but are not limited to, official guidebooks, official fictional materials, online sources, and the D&D community. If I'm quoting or citing a specific source, it'll pop up in that lower left corner. Otherwise, I'm paraphrasing from a mixture of my sources, like an academic essay. And before we dive in, let me know which you think Astarion will turn out to be. Give us a black heart emoji for neutral evil, and give us a normal heart emoji for chaotic neutral. And don't forget to hit that like button so that I know you want more videos like this. And be sure to click subscribe so that you'll be the first to know when more juicy lore drops. But also to beat YouTube, who seems to think that only 10% of returning viewers are ever going to be subscribed. And now that we've vanquished our YouTube overlords, grab your cozy drink because we're about to go a little deep. So, what are alignments? All alignments are a definition of how a character sees the world. They're a combination of which side of the spectrum of good and evil a character sits upon, but also in combination with how self-focused they are versus how society-focused they are. A character can sit in either good, neutral, or evil. As well, they have a secondary of either lawful, neutral, or chaotic. The only exception of this naming convention is the true neutral. And that's honestly because neutral just wouldn't sound good. This means that we have a lawful good, a chaotic good, and a neutral good. A lawful evil, a chaotic evil, and a neutral evil. And a chaotic neutral,
lawful neutral,
and a true neutral. In older versions of D&D, specific races, classes, gods, genders, etc., all had an alignment requirement. However, since 2019, this is no longer the case. Alignments are a beautiful skeleton. A guide, if you will, especially for player characters. This was part of the movement to make D&D more accessible, less racist, sexist, xenophobic, etc. But we'll have a whole chapter on that later, with quotes from an interview with an official game designer from Wizards of the Coast. But as we move forward in this essay, keep in mind, and also take all statements on Astarion's alignment with a grain of salt, because they're a guideline to him that was given when building an NPC. But all NPCs and player characters have the ability to shift alignments and make choices that sometimes fall outside of their alignments. And that's because that's the beauty of RPG. We're all thinking creatures, and thus sometimes we make choices that aren't true to our character. So alignments, they're not 100% a finality in decisions. Neutral evils are the most selfish and ruthless of all of the alignments. While chaotic neutrals are often seen as selfish, their selfishness is typically harmless or simply self-serving. However, neutral evils are evil characters that are 100% out for themselves. They're an evil alignment because they have no moral hindrances to the actions that they take. Unaliving, torturing, hiring hitmen, essay, theft, manipulation, all of these are on the table, and they usually never feel a hint of guilt or remorse. The rare exception being that neutral evils can build deep, lasting friendships or fall in love, and those people they can feel guilt towards the negative actions they've taken upon them. These evil actions are not done for a simple reason like that they're evil. No. They're done in pure selfish ambition. To quote the Player's Handbook, 3rd edition, neutral evil characters do whatever they can to get away with what they want, and they are completely out for themselves. They're power-hungry, selfish, manipulative characters that value survival, bodily autonomy, power, and pleasure above all else. But specifically, only their own. Again, unless they have a mate, then they value it for their mate as well. Simply put, neutral evils are ruthless characters with selfish spirits who would burn the world down to get what they desire. Unlike a neutral evil, who has evil intentions, the neutral and chaotic neutral is not their alignment to society versus selfishness, but rather their placement between good and evil. Chaotic neutrals have a freedom from both the restrictions of society, because they're very selfish and whimsical in choices, but they also have a freedom from morality around good and evil because they make their choices based on their own wants, needs, and moral compass. You might note I speak very highly and flowery of them. I'll give you 2 guesses why. That's correct. I am a chaotic neutral. Chaotic neutrals dislike authority unless they give that power to someone else. It isn't that they're unable to follow the rules, but more so that they only do it when it benefits them. They are the epitome of a brat. Although chaotic neutrals get a bad rap for being random, they're far from random. Their choices are always driven by their own desires, and they're highly selfish player characters. If upsetting the camp or being a chaos gremlin is making things difficult, that isn't because of a good or evil choice. It's simply that they're an impish character who gets pleasure from their disruptions. Much like I enjoy being sassy because I like the reaction that I get from my husband. Or how Astarion dislikes us offering to help people when it'll put him in danger because he values his own bodily autonomy above all else. Despite the fact that chaotic neutrals can be power hungry, they're not innately so, because that is typically an evil alignment trait. They're rather hungry for freedom. And if power happens to offer that freedom, then they'll take it. They are, after all, selfish, though not always in a bad way. And yes, you can in fact be selfish in a non-negative way. And being selfish doesn't mean that they don't have character traits that allow them to sometimes be selfless. It simply depends on how you build their personality. The simplest way to define a chaotic neutral is as someone who is selfish, but truly a free spirit. You might have noticed that Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't have alignments. Now, that isn't to say that the characters themselves have no alignment. As in other featured games like Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms, they do have alignments. However, for Baldur's Gate 3, Larian gave the players a lot more autonomy with the characters because not only could you play alongside them, helping shape their choices, but you could also play as them. Take Shadowheart for a great example. If you're playing her non-justiciar run, she'll start as a lawful neutral, despite followers of Shar in the Forgotten Realms being neutral evils. However, if you spare Aelin, she actually becomes that lawful neutral in her choices, whereas if you kill Aelin, she'll become neutral evil in her choices, at least according to seeing all of her approvals in my mod that reads those points. The same can be said for multiple characters, including Gale. According to Jeremy Crawford, a game designer for Wizards of the Coast, who are the current IP holders for D&D 5e, Baldur's Gate 3, and the Forgotten Realms. Quote, friendly reminder, no rule in D&D mandates your character's alignment, and no class is restricted to certain alignments. You determine your character's moral compass. I see discussions that refer to such rules, yet they don't exist in the 5th edition of D&D. Your character's alignment in D&D doesn't prescribe their behavior. Alignment describes inclinations. It's a role-playing tool, like flaws, bonds, and ideals. If any of those tools don't serve your group's bliss, don't use them. The game system doesn't rely on those tools. It's a long quote, but important to share in its entirety. Jeremy also continued on to say in the interview on alignments, quote, regarding a D&D monster alignment, here's a general rule from the monster manual. The alignment specified in the monster's stat block is the default. Feel free to depart from it and change a monster's alignment to suit the needs of your campaign, end quote. In this interview, Jeremy also noted that in previous editions of the game, changing your alignment had negative side effects, or it was punished. D&D, according to Crawford, is actively working to remove a lot of their racist tropes, thankfully, and alignment is one of them. This change started in 2019 and has opened the door to allowing characters to slowly shift their alignments as they explore the world, and they change and they adapt. just like a real person would. It brings a new level of realism to the RPG element. And personally, I'm noting this ability because I do believe that shifting alignments is something that happens to Astarion depending on how you play Baldur's Gate 3, who you play as, and what ending you choose to give to Astarion. So, let's discuss Astarion's personality prior to defeating Cazador. Astarion is hyper-focused on himself. Even when you play as him, he seeks to find a way to keep the tadpole in order to stay free of Cazador. I am in no way implying that Astarion's hyperfixation on freedom, power, or selfish games is negative. Keep in mind, I myself am a chaotic neutral, and in real life I deeply relate to Astarion, especially the version of me before I started healing from my trauma. It's why I love him. However, that doesn't change the fact that Astarion is very selfish. He does enjoy slaughter and is happy with either slaying the goblins or the grove, as we saw in our Astarion approvals only playthrough. He'll make choices that are based on survival, ruthlessly so, and without seeking additional information. For example, he wants to kill Aelin because he thinks that's how we defeat Ketheric. He didn't wait for a reply. He approves of demanding Shadowheart slaughter her right away. Astarion is driven by his desires, much like a chaotic neutral. However, let's be absolutely clear. What makes a chaotic neutral selfish isn't just their chaotic nature, it's their neutral alignment. Neutral, either the neutral versus chaotic versus lawful, or neutral versus good versus evil, both have the same core in common. They're led by their own personal desires, not by morals and not by laws. So Astarion's selfishness alone doesn't make him a chaotic neutral, it just makes him neutral in some respect. What really stands out the most in early game for Astarion is his lack of remorse. He manipulates you into falling in love with him as a means to protect himself. This act falls into both a neutral evil's manipulations for power, but also a chaotic neutral's manipulations for self-preservation and self-interest. However, Astarion kills without remorse. That's a sign of a neutral evil. Astarion also has no issues with the gnome slavery. Again, a sign of a neutral evil. We can argue back and forth upon every single example, but up until the romance confession, Astarion shows all the signs of being a neutral evil, which is a perfect pair for me because he makes me the worst possible version of myself, but in the best possible way. However, after the love confession, slowly through the end of Act 2, and in Act 3 up until Cazador, Astarion starts to show more and more signs of being less evil in what his approvals are. By the time we reach Cazador's lair, Astarion feels remorse for Sebastian and the others. If you went through the Astarion approvals only run with us, you'll see that he doesn't approve of ascending.
Oh my god, the whole purpose of doing this challenge was because I wanted to see what would happen in this moment and what he would approve of. And he actually approves the most. He has a -1, but then a +3. So he approves the most of me not wanting him to ascend. I knew it. That's when I was like, he's going to approve of both. But I was like, he'll approve more of this one. I know it. I know.
Anytime I ascend him, just know I'm 100% making a choice. He approves of you talking him out of it, unless you didn't romance him and played an evil run at the same time. Then he has a -1 in the code. So by this point in Act 3, Astarion has moved from a neutral evil to more of a chaotic neutral if you decide to keep him a spawn. As noted in Kyle Schreier's Playing as a Vampire in D&D article on D&D Beyond, which we've referenced multiple times in videos now, the only way for a spawn to be free of their master, should the master refuse to make them a true vampire, is for them to kill their master. If you've ever played a spawn, or you've ever been in a campaign with a spawn, you'll know that this allows your spawn character to now be more akin to a standard player character. And following the directives from Crawford on the 5E changes of alignment, you would be able to change your alignment after you free yourself from your spawnhood. So yes, Astarion is, in the majority of the game, in fact, a neutral evil, just as he's listed in his cards in the Forgotten Realms games and wikis. However, if you choose to keep Astarion as a spawn after you kill Cazador, he moves more into the realm of a chaotic neutral, because he still stays selfish and impulsive, but he's actually able to feel remorse, and he's lost his ruthless edge. Before we go, this episode was an idea that came from a question in our Discord group, the Fang Gang. So if you're interested in connecting with us and you have questions of your own that you want to ask, please come and join us. I'll put that link in the description down below. Also, I can't let you leave without reminding you that my second book, Infinity's Secrets, will be coming out on May 1st, 2025. The series is a spicy, poly, dark romance with vampires. It's the second book, and it's enemies to lovers. And thank you for joining me today, because writing and gaming, they're my passions. And with subscribers like you, I get to explore those passions. So I hope I see you again in the next one. And good night, darling.
And now you're all mine. And I'm all yours. Until morning, at least.